Hello. William Blake has been called a mystic, and yet some critics, such as Alfred Cazin, did not feel very happy with this appellation, because when we call William Blake a mystic, we refuse to see him as a man among men, as someone who speaks to other people about experiences that he experiences in life like other human beings. Blake etched his poems. He called his writings illuminated writings. Illuminated writings are his own words. What did he do? How did he write them? Let's first understand this small fact about William Blake. He took a copper plate. Today, if you want to etch, then you would have to take a copper plate which is covered with wax, and with an etching needle you would be making holes in the copper plate and try to draw a pattern. If you want to write something, you may do so. If you want to draw a picture, you may do that either. But you would be doing it by removing the wax from the copper plate with the help of an etching needle. Blake's method was different. He took a copper plate and he drew with some material which would not be affected by acid, some acid resistant material, and he drew, or he wrote on that copper plate, on a small copper plate, with a pen, with the ink of a medium resistant to acid. But remember, he must have done everything in a manner which could give the impression on paper, the right impression on paper. Because if you try to write something on a copper plate, the manner in which you write on paper and then try to create the impression on another piece of paper, then you would get an opposite impression. Try and look at the page you are reading in a mirror and see what impression you get there. The impression that you get in a mirror is the type of impression that Blake must have drawn on the copper plates. After having done this, he poured acid on this copper plate, which would eat up the copper beside his drawing or writing, and thus he would prepare his copper plate. This copper plate would be pressed upon paper to create impressions, and he would then take each sheet of paper and draw and paint on it with a paintbrush, with water and color. Thus you would find that there are variations in different versions of the book of that Blake printed. This was how Songs of Innocence and of Experience was prepared. He would then take a needle and stitch at the spine, and that was how the book was ready. So the different copies of the book that are available today in the collections of very rich collectors are different in appearance, even if the difference is not much. The difference is still there. So Blake wrote his words with his pen, with this kind of a pen, on copper plates. He did not print them with ready-made letters. The result is that if you want to understand Blake's mind, you must look at these pages, the pages which Blake actually drew, the pages which Blake actually prepared. Many a time you get the impression of meaning coming out of what Blake has to say with the help of these pictures. Many a time these pictures sort of laugh at what Blake has to say. The pictures sort of contradict what Blake has to say in his writings. Let me first give you an example of a picture that does not contradict. For instance, the sick rose. If you read this poem, you would find that Blake is giving the picture, supports the idea that Blake puts forward in this poem. It's a short poem, just running into 2 stanzas, and I'll read it out for you. O rose, thou art sick, the invisible worm that flies in the night in the howling storm has found out thy bed of crimson joy, and his dark secret love does thy life destroy. Blake says that these worms are invisible, but if you look at the picture, you would find that there is a caterpillar in one corner, and there are several worms, and one of the worms that is entering the flower and jumping off from a leaf is actually very much like a human being. So the crimson joy that the worm destroys is actually a comment upon human jealousy. O rose, thou art sick, the invisible worm. The worms are there. They are quite visible in the picture. But he says, O rose, thou art sick, the invisible worm that flies in the night, in the howling storm, has found out thy bed of crimson joy, and his dark secret love does thy life destroy. Blake talks about love in his poems. You remember The Clod and the Pebble, that poem in which he talked about 2 kinds of love. Love seeketh not itself to please. I am reading this poem from the Songs of Experience. Love seeketh not itself to please, nor for itself hath any care, but for another gives its ease, and builds a heaven in hell's despair. If there are 2 people who love one another, then if the love is genuine, no matter what calamity might have fallen on them, they would still be happy. In spite of all the discomfort, in spite of age, in spite of disease, in spite of material hardship, in spite of poverty, there would be heaven in hell's despair. Love seeketh not itself to please, nor for itself hath any care, but for another gives its ease, and builds a heaven in hell's despair. There is hell all around, but love creates heaven. However, Blake soon contradicts himself. These are the words of the clod, of the earth. So sang a little clod of clay, trodden with the cattle's feet. The clod of clay cannot stand the feet of the cattle, the raindrops, or the plowshares. But the pebble in the brook in the second stanza, in the second half of the second stanza says, but a pebble of the brook warbled out these meters meet. And what are these words? What are the views of the pebble? The pebble says, love seeketh only self to please, to bind another to its delight, joys in another's loss of ease, and builds a hell in heaven's despite. The first experience of love that was described by the Claude was an innocent experience of love, a child's conception of love, an innocent person's conception of love. The love that we really find around us is as the pebble describes. Love seeketh only self to please. Love does not care for another person's delight, for the beloved's delight. To bind another in its delight, joys in another's loss of ease, and builds a hell in heaven's despite. There is no reason for unhappiness. You have material well-being, wealth. You are in good health, and still you are unhappy because there is no genuine love. Did Shakespeare not say, all friendship mere feigning, all friendship mere folly? So, this is the love that the pebble describes is probably a more faithful description of love than what the Claude had described earlier. And Blake was interested in seeing both aspects of love. Probably 400 years before Blake lived Kabir in India. He was born in 1399, which was about the last year of Chaucer's life. A long gap of time, and far away from Blake. And Blake also, and Kabir also had said, "Dhai aakhar prem ka padhai so pandit hoy." What kind of wisdom does love give? Blake talks about 3 kinds of experiences. The 2 kinds are described here in the songs of innocence and of experience. The first is the experience of innocence, that is the experience of the child. The second is the experience of the experienced person, the experience of a man who has attained maturity. Such a person, such a man or woman discovers that there is no true love. There is no true virtue. There is no true faith. The faith about which we talk is probably more to create a favorable impression about ourselves than a genuine love between an individual and his maker. And the third experience is the experience that the experience of innocence that comes after knowledge, after experience, after the blighting experience that life offers. When there is severe cold, all the green plants suddenly die overnight. The real life that we live offers that kind of experience. But out of this blight, out of this kind of experience, extreme experience, comes another kind of innocence, that is the innocence of the wise. That is the kind of innocence that Blake finds in Jesus Christ. He does not think that Jesus Christ was a meek person. Blake's Jesus is a revolutionary. Blake's Jesus is like his Thor, like his Los, who is a blacksmith, who is a man of imagination, but he also has a hammer in his hand. He would break things before he would build a new and happy world. Blake probably looked at himself as Los, just as Nietzsche, the German philosopher, looked at himself as Zarathustra. So here you have a person talking about love. Closer to our time, in Hindi literature, you had Mahadevi Verma, who in her early poems, later collected in Yama, earlier they were written as Neeraja, which were the poems in Neeraja were written at a very early age when she was just a schoolgirl. They are also mystical in nature. But the mysticism of Neeraja and the mysticism of William Blake are very different. William Blake is a man exposed to the society. Mahadevi Verma is a person who is prevented from getting exposed to the society. So she writes about clouds, about the wind, about the rain, and so on and so forth. Blake writes about human experiences. Even when he writes about, for instance, the lamb or the tiger, he writes about human experiences. And there is a kind of balance that Blake creates in his poetry. What kind of a balance is this? In the Songs of Innocence, you have the lamb. In the Songs of Experience, you have the tiger. Remember to spell the tiger with a Y and not with an I. Tyger, that is Blake's tiger. So, Blake asks, I'm reading the lamb from Songs of Innocence. Little lamb who made thee, dost thou know who made thee? The influence of the Christian Catechism that you find also in the Book of Common Prayer, the Anglican Book of Common Prayer. The influence of the Catechism is there on this poem. You have questions and answers in the Catechism, in the church services. So, Blake adopts the form of the Catechism to ask questions, to put questions to the lamb. Little lamb who made thee, dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life and bid thee feed by the stream and o'er the mead, gave thee clothing of delight, softest clothing woolly bright, gave thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice. Little lamb who made thee, dost thou know who made thee? And then, apparently, it is the child who comes and tells the lamb. First you have the questions, a series of questions. And then the child tells the lamb, "Little lamb, I'll tell thee, little lamb, I'll tell thee, he is called by thy name. For he calls himself a lamb, he is meek and he is mild, he became a little child. I a child and thou a lamb, we are called by his name. Little lamb, who God bless thee, little lamb, God bless thee." There is a kind of periphrasis in the 4 lines here. He is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb, he is meek and he is mild, he became a little child. Jesus Christ is considered the Son of God. He is the child of God. However, Jesus never called himself a lamb in the Bible. Blake takes a poetic license in doing so. So here, the child is, as it were, referring to God with the same seriousness and awe that you find the prophets in the Old Testament doing. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Micah, people like them. The Jews called God Yahweh. They didn't try to name him. They tried to find all sorts of other names for God, as if God were present and he was not to be named. There is one of Blake's portraits that he did for the book of Job, which is called the Behemoth and the Leviathan, that you find printed as a specimen of his paintings in one of your blocks, in block 6. And you have God at the top, looking down towards Job and his comforters. And below them you have the Behemoth, and below still you have the Leviathan. So the picture is almost partitioned into 4 sections, 4 segments. And that is how. So Blake was immensely interested in the Bible. He was, by the way, self-educated. He was literate. He was capable of writing, unlike probably Kabir. And that is why you find an intricate pattern, an artistic pattern developing in Blake to a degree that you don't find even in Mahadevi Verma, who illustrated her poems with the help of her sketches. But Verma was not satisfied with herself as a pictorial artist. And Blake remains probably one of the best poets in this particular sense of illustration of one's poems. He remains probably a unique example of this kind of writing, where the poet takes care to illustrate, to ensure the reception of his poems in the manner in which he himself did. One of my American students once asked me why the tiger was grinning in the picture. You have the page in which on the right hand side you have the tree, and below it you have the tiger. I had not noticed that the tiger was grinning. I just noticed that the tiger was there. It did not at first sight appear to be even tame. But after this question from this American student, I realized that the tiger was quite tame here, and it was indeed grinning. Why was it grinning? The answer can be found in the poem, in the Songs of Experience, which you have already read, and which so many of us have read when we were young. What is this poem? Let's read it aloud. Because the poem, The Tiger, is not a poem only for children. The tiger is set to balance the lamb in the Songs of Innocence. Who made the lamb? Blake's answer is, or the child's answer is, it's God who made thee. Now, who made the tiger? Tiger, tiger, burning bright, in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? You have the same style of the Christian Catechism here. There is a question. Tiger, tiger, burning bright, in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burned the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? Notice the images of experience. Life appears full of terror to one who goes out in the world, one who goes out in the open. Blake was a great introvert, probably like Socrates. However, Blake did not like Socrates and Plato. But Blake was a great introvert. And although we know that Socrates was very fond of talking to young boys, the boys alone came out of their homes, and they alone had the privilege of learning or playing or going out freely. So Socrates talked to these boys, asked them questions, and changed their minds. Blake met many people, as we already know, at Johnson's place, Johnson the printer, not the great man of letters. Although they lived in the same city, that is London, Samuel Johnson was alive when Blake was there. And the poetical sketches were published where Johnson was very old, very close to death, that is 1783, and Samuel Johnson died in 1784. But they didn't know one another. Neither Blake apparently knew Samuel Johnson, nor Samuel Johnson knew Blake. So Blake was a great introvert, and towards the end of his life, it is said that for 2 years, he never went out of his house, except once when he had to call a porter. So it's not surprising that the world outside appeared to be a dreadful world, a world full of terror to William Blake. What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp, dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? This is an important question that Blake tries to understand. Did he who made the lamb made thee? Was the tiger made by the same God that made the lamb? Probably yes. Although the paintings for the book of Job were done much later, and the artwork for the songs of innocence and of experience were done earlier in life, in the 90s, in the 1790s, to be more precise. But you have, the picture itself suggests, Behemoth and the Leviathan, for instance, suggests that God made everything, the lamb and the tiger. Gentleness and experience, ferocity, innocence and experience, gentleness and ferocity were all aspects of the same God. So, why is the tiger grinning? We would like to ask ourselves. The tiger is grinning because he finds the child or the man puzzled about creation. The tiger knows. Perhaps this is one of the answers. I don't know. If I had this American student, I would have told her that the tiger was grinning because Blake thought that the tiger knew more than what we know about God. A strange reply. But then Blake said that the eyes sees more than the mind understands. So we don't really understand everything that we see around us. And that could be one of the replies, one of the answers. And the poem ends once again with the same words with which it began. Tiger, tiger burning bright, in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Here you have a kind of religious substratum that informs, that infuses life into these poems, the lamb and the tiger. William Blake, like Kabir, addressed social issues, religious issues, because Kabir, who had been probably a disciple of Ramanand, did not think the way other Ramanandis thought about Ram. His words were, Dasrath sut tihun lok bakhana, Ram naam ka maram hai ana. So he did not think of Ram as the son of Dashrath, king of Ayodhya. His Ram was a different Ram. Just as Blake's Jesus Christ is a different person from the Jesus Christ of the church. He made a scathing remark in one of his most seminal works, prophetic seminal works, that is the marriage of heaven and hell. He made a scathing remark there. The marriage of heaven and hell is full of aphorisms. There is less of poetry, or let us say they are prose poems. They are full of aphorisms. One of them is, he says that the prison house is made of the bricks of law, and the brothel is made of the bricks of religion. Blake thought that Jesus Christ was holy not because he was a meek follower of the 10 Commandments of Moses, but because he broke each one of those commandments. You would remember that Jesus said, man is not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath for the man. One of the commandments says that thou shalt not commit adultery. And Christ goes and defends an adulteress. So, Jesus Christ, Blake's Jesus Christ, is a man of imagination. He is not a stony figure, keen on imposing laws. He is a man of imagination. He is a sensitive person. He is imagination incarnate. And Blake thought, just like the rishis in the late Vedic age, the rishi who imagined, who wrote the Isavash Upanishad, Blake thought like him that the poet was another god on earth. He was the voice of God on earth. He was God's prophet. Such an exalted position Blake held for the poet. If you read The Little Black Boy, you find Blake concerned about social issues. In The Little Black Boy, he talks about the hardship that the Negroes who were treated as slaves in his England experienced. I'll read out this poem, The Little Black Boy. My mother bore me in the southern wild, and I am black, but oh, my soul is white. White as an angel is the English child, but I am black as if bereaved from light. My mother taught me underneath a tree, and sitting down before the heat of day, she took me on her lap and kissed me, and pointing to the east began to say, look on the rising sun, there God does live, and gives his light and gives his heat away, and flowers and trees and breasts, and men receive, and flowers and trees and beasts and men receive comfort in morning, joy in the noonday. And we are put on earth a little space that we may learn to bear the beams of light, love. And these black bodies and this sunburnt face is but a cloud and like a shady grove. For when our souls have learned the heat to bear, the cloud will vanish, we shall hear his voice saying, "Come out from the grove, my love and care, and round my golden tent like lambs rejoice." Thus did my mother say and kissed me, and thus I say to little English boy, when I from black and he from white could cloud free, and round the tent of God like lambs we joy. I'll shade him from the heat till he can bear to lean in joy upon our Father's knee, and then I'll stand and stroke his silver hair and be like him, and he will then love me. The image, the primeval image of the rising sun, where he says God lives. Blake might have recalled the image in Isaiah. You would remember the image in the Rig Veda, the praise of dawn, as Ashwavati, Gomati, Ashwavati, Vibhavari, Sunritavati, a doer of good, great deeds. That is how the sun is praised. Ashwavati, Gomati, Vibhavari, Sunritavati. And similarly here the sun is praised by the mother for the child to learn from. Look on the rising sun, there God does live, and gives his light and gives his heat away, and flowers and trees and beasts and men receive comfort in morning, joy in noonday. However, Blake is speaking ironically in this poem, because the mother is teaching her child, the black mother is teaching her black child to learn a religion of servility, so that he may live in hope of a better life in a different world, more real than the present one. However, the real world from which her morality is to buffer and alleviate him is a painful world. And this poem, although a song of innocence, is an ironic statement on the England in Blake's time. Thank you.